I call Dr. Paul Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on this human-assisted reproductive technology bill, amendment bill, and I must agree with Stevie Chadwick that the science in this area has gone a long way over the last 30 years. 79 was the first birth of an IVF baby, but prior to that, it certainly in New Zealand was an area that was extraordinarily unregulated, and your memory of obstetricians going out, collecting sperm and bringing them back with few records kept is absolutely accurate. Leanne Dalziel, in the first reading of this bill, did question why it was that it came to the attention of the House, and I understand that it was the media, the good old media, that had made inquiries to the Ministry of Justice as to whether some of the clinics were, even though they were acting in good faith, were illegally storing embryos and gametes. Of course, gametes are defined as sperms and eggs. There was a little bit of confusion from Radio New Zealand during the first reading, and it's important to make sure they are aware of that. But this bill does indeed endeavour to make the rules absolutely crystal clear, because it is vital for the clinics involved and, of course, for the patients that are involved and very emotionally involved in these issues. Embryos and gametes must be disposed of after 10 years from the 22nd of November 2004, or 10 years after the date subsequently. The Ethics Committee does have the ability to extend storage, and that's very important given the sort of situations where you've got a young person aged 17 or 18 with testicular or ovarian cancer, and they may not want to start their family until they're 28 or 29. So it is very important to have that ability of flexibility. There were indeed 8 submitters to the bill, and all of them supported the need to clarify the storage times. I believe that the committee worked extremely well together, and that generally there is cross-party agreement on the essence of what this bill is about. I also note that Diane Yates in her submission was concerned about the science behind storage. She had the view that it wasn't well evidence-based, where in actual fact we do know that provided there is a steady state freezing environment and that it is devoid of irradiation, that probably sperm, embryo and eggs can be stored safely and consistently, probably for many decades. Where the technical difficulty is in both the freezing process and the thawing process. And of course, if there is not an even environment, then one may damage the embryos and gametes. I think Diane Yates compared it a little bit to Wattie's frozen peas and their life of 2 years that was recommended. That's certainly not the case in this very sophisticated environment where human eggs, gametes and embryos are stored. Just to give Mr. Speaker a bit of an idea as to the extent of what is going on in New Zealand, there's about 1,000 or about 1,100 babies born under IVF in New Zealand every year, about 8,500 in Australia, and literally hundreds of thousands around the world, mainly from the Western world. They compose between about 1 to 3% of all births in most OECD countries. In 2010, the data that we were given showed that there were 12,000 embryos stored in New Zealand, about 68 eggs and 75,000 straws of sperm, each straw containing many, many millions of those excellent little sperms. Fertility Associates estimated 33% of their stored sperms and 18% of stored embryos would be affected by the bill. And as the Minister said, there were issues that were brought up during the submission period, including a grace period after the expiry of the 10-year storage limit. This was important so that both patients had time to appeal to the Ethics Committee if they wanted an extension, and also just the technical applicability for clinics of not being able to dispose of the gametes and embryos on a particular date. So I think that that's a very practical and realistic thing. There's the issue of stored gametes used to create embryos that are then stored, and of course the clock starts from the moment the gametes themselves are stored. You can't have two goes at it by converting the gametes into an embryo and then having another 10 years. And then gametes and embryos stored in other countries, again, that will apply from the beginning time and extend 10 years. We were told during the committee that this was becoming more and more an issue as people came to New Zealand and had undergone initial harvest overseas and required the treatment here in New Zealand. The Ethics Committee's role in making decisions about storage periods is indeed very important, and as I pointed out earlier on, each case is quite distinct. It could be a young woman of 16 with ovarian cancer who clearly wants to have children in the future, and her ovarian tissue may be stored for a period of time of over 10 years. And it's clearly impossible to legislate for each specific case. I did note that during the first reading, Te Ururoa Flavel made the point that the Māori Party has a considerable sense of sadness that we even have bills like these in front of the House. And he went on, he said, I cannot say that anyone in the Māori Party is at ease with the discussions around assisted reproductive technology, but we would be even more uneasy if these discussions went on without Māori being engaged in a real way. Mr. Speaker, I absolutely agree that it's vital that Māori are included, but it's important to bear in mind that the genesis of the original Human Assisted Reproductive Technology Act occurred over a long period of time, over a decade, and involved ethicists, consumers, scientists, clinicians, psychologists, lawyers, and eventually the Hart Bill came into enactment in 2004. I think it's also important to point out that the clinics and the consumers and the clinicians have really not found any major problems with it at all, and it is very useful that here we are making this amendment today for a minor point regarding clarity. But in terms of a review, the fact that it is a bill that is flexible, an act that is flexible, is very much in tune with the complexity of the science and the change of science with time. I don't believe there is need for a review at this stage of events. It's only been enacted for 6 years, but maybe that is something for the future.